Do you ever make mistakes and wish you could fix them? In this video, you'll see tips, tricks, mistakes, and fixes. Fixing is a skill that restores your confidence, and that's a super important component of your art journey. Without it, you'll never try new things. My name's Anica, and all these things I mentioned will come to light through this painting of the Queen Mary Falls, Rocks and Bridge in beautiful Queensland, Australia. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's get going. This is my final painting, so I sketched it out from a frame in the video clip. I'm using Arches 300 GSM paper and a range of supplies. My paints are from Daniel Smith. I'm using Aquapasto from Winsor Newton and a couple of palette knives. The rest of my materials will be listed in the description and I'll introduce them along the way. I'm wetting the area around the main waterfall first to keep those edges soft, but the rest of the first layer is on dry paper. The idea for the first layer is to paint everything except for the whites, which of course are the top big waterfall and the little one under the bridge. I've mixed a manganese blue hue, bit of permanent alizarin, and it looks like this. It's a granulating color and it separates beautifully. This is the manganese hue by Daniel Smith. I absolutely love it. And I'm using it because it resembles the reflections that could be seen on the rocks, so it's a little bit mottled and giving the impression of wetness. This area around Queen Mary Falls is rich in culture and is regarded as sacred by the Githable people of Australia. It was formed by volcanic activity millions of years ago, and the waterfall cascades over a basalt cliff and plunges 40 meters deep. Then, as it runs under the little bridge, it eventually joins up with the Condamine River. I've given my painting a little spritz so that it doesn't dry on me too fast. And up in the top right-hand corner, starting with some nickel titanate yellow, and then adding some nickel azo yellow with my existing blue mix to add in some more greens. I mentioned the rich culture of the area. I didn't even know about all the local legends and folklore, and as my husband and I trailed the 2-kilometer walk around the falls, I was literally waiting for little fairies to pop out of the lichen-covered tree trunks and rocks. That's what it felt like. It truly was a mystical experience. I'm adding a bit of quinacridone sienna to my existing yellow-blue mix to block in the bridge. And then looking at my reference and with a slightly thicker mix of the same paint, I'm carefully looking at the abstract shapes in the small waterfall under the bridge and blocking those in. A few downward dry brush strokes and it's already looking like a little bit of a waterfall. I'm adding a little bit more manganese blue to make this same mixture a bit darker and coming in with the shadowed area under the bridge. And then I will just wipe out a few of those larger rocks, lift them with my thirsty brush, and I'll leave the painting to dry. The painting is dry now, so I'm marking my two little men in there, just two little carrot shapes, and I'm also marking in the shadowed areas of the foliage in the upper right-hand corner, just to help me block them in. When it comes to natural organic shapes, I love using my sumi brush, and I'm going to start now with the waterfall. The first thing I'd like to do is wet it so that it stays soft. But then, so that it's not too wet, I'm going to blot it with a tissue. I'm turning my paper upside down. Oh, and my reference, of course. This really helps with looking at shapes in an abstract way and overriding that hugely analytical, boring brain. I was first taught this in my early 20s. I was painting an oil portrait and my teacher came along, turned everything upside down and said, "Now try again." There you go. I'll be blocking in these abstract shapes with some manganese blue and a teeny touch of permanent alizarin. This is the right way up again, and yeah, I think it looks okay, just softening some of those edges. Now for the rocky texture on the right-hand side of the waterfall, coming in with manganese blue and a bit of burnt yellow ochre. This produces a really nice soft grey. And then adding a teeny touch of ultramarine blue for those shadowed areas in the cliffs. I actually love soft greys. I know we're all different, but you know the world is full of shades of grey. Sorry about the pun, but it's a beautiful soft grey. And still further to the right, I'm adding more manganese to the mix for the shadowed area between the cliffs and the foliage. I'm adding in more darker areas in the foliage, but then have a look at the Sumi brush. You just push the brush with the dark paint into the lighter foliage area, and this negatively creates the little leaves on the lighter areas. Marking in some of the cliff shapes on the left-hand side. You know, it's often a lot easier to add pencil marks on top of a paint layer, as they're far easier to erase later. Then I'm pulling out my Aquapasto to add to my cliff paint of manganese and a bit of burnt yellow ochre, because then later on I'll be able to scrape. I mentioned earlier that this was a basalt cliff created from cooled off volcanic lava. It's rich in iron and magnesium, and that's why it has a dark color to it. And I think the soft grey looks just right. Again, I'm pushing in my Sumi brush into the green area to suggest some leafy foliage. Now it's time for my plastic palette knife and creating some basalt cliff texture. I like the two sides it has, a shorter one and a longer one. When you pull the knife firmly, it collects the paint on the edge and forms a nice shadow. I love that effect. You can do this with any other tool for scraping. All you have to do is just add a little more pressure to the side of the tool that you'd like the little shadow to be on. I'm doing the same to the right-hand side of the waterfall. That was a nice scrape. I love that. And then adding a little bit of ultramarine blue to my mix to make some shadowy bits. And a bit of dry brushing on the rocks for a bit of texture. And some more rocky texture for these misty rocks just before we get to the base of the waterfall. I've added a small pea-sized blob of Aquapasto to my palette, and again with some manganese blue and some burnt yellow ochre, I'm mixing a nice grey for the rocky area. I love these discoveries when there's a colour you haven't used like forever, and then you find it and you learn about it and you go, what have I been missing out on? I'm looking at some of the darks created, but I think I'll pencil them in. So up here there's a prominent rock and it's facing that way, making our eye go that way. And it's got a shadow down there. I'm just drawing in some of the really dark shapes. So when I look at it, so these are the dark areas. Let's put them in. You can see that I have to re-dip quite often because the paint's very thick. And it goes around. But I do want these shapes to connect somewhat, so I'm not going to overdo the outlines or anything. These massive boulders at the base of the waterfall are a result of the basalt cliff collapsing in the late 19th century. We've read about some of these facts on an information board in the picnic area. And because I have my Aquapasto, it'll be very easy or easier to scrub out. So all I've got to do is kind of see what I'm doing. It feels a little bit dry, so I'm going to give it a light spritz. And now it should be easier, look, to scrape in. But see how much easier it is with a little bit of Aquapasto. It just doesn't dry on you as fast. So there's our rocks. And on this rock, it looks like bush. We'll just put in a few lines that suggest it could be a rock, or just fuzz it out so no one knows what it is. A soft white rubber here. Going to erase these lines in the waterfall area. Now for the bridge, I'm going to apply some burnt yellow ochre with a little bit of the colour showing through. And these are rocks here, so just making some form and repeating some of this colour in the water. I'm just going to wet the water a little bit and put some of this dark colour where the water tips over. It can be a little bit darker still. Before I stop for a while, I'm going to add some cobalt blue to some burnt yellow ochre, creating another type of grey, and coming into this grassy area by pushing in. And then with this same colour, even adding a bit more of the cobalt blue to it, coming in with the real dark underneath the bridge. But I'm going to blot it out a little bit because of the light coming in from the other side. Even though you can't see it on the photo, if I just put a whole blob there, it somehow doesn't look right. Anyway, I'm going with that, whatever it is. And we'll come back to the rest of that after a short break. Breaks are good for you. Now for a section that really didn't need to happen. I decided I wanted to add some transparent colour to this top corner. Not a good idea. As it turns out, I added phthalo green and pyrrole orange and just messed it all up, but Stick around because it all gets fixed up later. I'm thinking that the stony path looks too clean and too smooth, so I've decided to wet the whole path and just throw in a few colours that are about the painting just to harmonize it all. So there's a little bit of lavender, a little bit of raw umber, and I'll allow these colors to mingle together and run on top of the existing path. After letting it run, I added some deeper raw umber and green to the start of the path and a little bit of salt on top. Yellow in there, just little droplets here and there. As if I didn't have enough paint in that top corner, I added some more. But never you mind, we'll fix it up. Using a bit of manganese blue with a little bit of lavender, just coming onto these rocks here and adding a little bit of salt. At the bottom of the waterfall, there's a pool where the water catches and then from there it flows under the bridge. It's time to soften and fix the waterfall. I've brushed water over it and on the sides and I'm just softening. I'm adding a little more water to the waterfall to really make sure that it's very damp so that I can lay in some soft shadows in the waterfall. I've mixed a creamy mix of lavender with a tiny bit of raw umber to get that nice soft grey look, and am looking at the abstract shapes on my reference photo to replicate the fall of the water. Legend has it by the locals that Queen Mary Falls were actually named after Queen Mary herself, who as a child travelled on horseback to see these magnificent waterfalls. Yeah, I can see that happening if she took the anti-clockwise loop, as it's a much softer descent, and then you cross Spring Creek, which seems pretty small for such a grandiose cascade. This takes you to the lookout, giving you a higher perspective of the waterfall. And then she'd have to go back again. There's no social media proof of this activity, so we'll just have to take it as the legend that it is. Then looking at my reference photo, I'm just deepening some of the light shadows on the bottom waterfall. Contrary to the anti-clockwise way of getting around the waterfall, we went the clockwise way, which was down some steepish stairs all the way down, and then the waterfall seemed to be so distant, so quiet, until we turned a sharp right corner, and then every step was louder and louder. Every step was also a different scene as we emerged deeper and deeper into the rainforest. The path was narrow and there were no fences, which is fine. It just means that common sense prevails. Some places there's too many fences. I was well on my way of totally overdoing things. And I'm sharing this with you because I'll be showing you how I fixed it. This little section over the bridge has been sped up by 2 just to make it quicker, and then we're into the fixing stages. Now, what I'm thinking is that after the railing of the bridge goes up here, there'll be lines from the railing and there'll be the rocks in the background, and it'll all be a bit too busy. So let's change our tact. I'd like to diffuse that whole area between the rocks and the bridge because it's way too busy, so I'm applying masking tape to the bridge. This will make it a lot easier. Okay, now I'm going to spray it with a bit of water. And I do have a little bit of Aquapasto in there, so hopefully that'll help the paint to dissolve even more. But I'll just let that sit for a few minutes. Now I'm taking a soft but firm brush and I'm just diffusing it like that. So you can still see the rocks somewhat, but not much. Yeah, and I think I like that a whole lot better. It didn't take much to change all of that, so I'm taking a tissue to just wipe this area, but I'm not going to blot the rocks at all, otherwise, you know, it'll be too much of a giveaway. We're into artistic secrets. So there you go. In fact, if I just lift a little bit more just from the edge of the bridge and look and create this misty, it's not white, but it's just a little bit more misty border, it will actually look like there's more atmosphere between the bridge and the background, making them look a little bit more 3D. Now we'll let it dry. Now let's remove the tape. I think we have created some distance between the rocks and the bridge. And having that little dark bit there helps us, otherwise it would have been too light. I'm going to mark the fence in with some chalk or a pastel pencil, just very lightly, because then it's easy to rub out. I'm going to use a soft rubber. See, that rubs out quite easily. So I can redo that line if I want to. And then the fence on this side. Using a pastel or a chalk pencil, you know, you can fiddle till you get it right. I'm using my rigger brush with some Goethite, which is a medium soft brown colour, and testing it first. Then I'm painting in the railings by moving my hand along the paper in stages. This keeps me in control. And now for this one. Make the curve first. And this one's got to end up around about there. I'm going to wait for that to dry so that I don't smudge when I'm trying to apply the posts. With the people that are here, they're standing here, so I'm going to come in with a little bit of burnt sienna. Put his head there. Give him an orange shirt, like a carrot. And some blue pants. And his mate. If you use a colour like burnt sienna, it's a good fleshy colour. Burnt umber for darker skin, and then you can dress them up with some bright clothes. And give him his pants. And the other guy, now for some more damage control. You don't have to see it as a failure. but as hope for a good outcome. It's a skill you can develop, and there are so many ways of fixing things without being obvious. Corner. So I've sprayed it gently, and I am only gently brushing away the paint, but I'm not blotting it at all. I'm just getting my tissue, dampened tissue, and blotting some of the lighter foliage around the dark bits. Adding a little bit of white with some yellow. While that green corner is still a little bit damp, I'm going to give it a tiny little spritz or splatter. Just really any brush will do. A little bit of white, a little bit of yellow. Now the fence is dry, so now it's time to put in some posts. Again, I'll be doing them with my rigger brush and some raw umber. I really should have done the back ones first, but there you go. So I might have to wait for these to dry or just wing it like that. And now this particular rock here will be a little bit more shadowed. Putting a little bit of darkness in there between the grasses. This is a pool of water where just taking some very thin goethite to make it a little bit browny there. And what's a waterfall without some decent splash? You can use a toothbrush. I'm using a fan brush with a little bit of gouache, just making a very creamy consistency. Add some splatter around the waterfall. You get wet there, so that's what happens. I'd like to enhance the railing, and to do that I'll be using a white pencil. It's called a Verithin pencil from Prismacolors, and the reason I like it is that it goes onto the paper very smoothly, meaning that when you're working on textured paper, the pencil will actually travel in and out of the textures, the dips and the hills, creating a much smoother finish. And with my fan brush, just squirt up a little bit of water like that, bit of splashing happening here and there, and just mask the bridge in there just to give it a little bit of splash. So it's the next day now, and I'm looking to see what still needs to be done. So I think that the difference between the bridge and the background here, it's too similar, so I need to bring the bridge forward a little bit. That's what I'd like to do. So I'm taking some manganese blue with a little bit of burnt yellow ochre, and I'm just going to strengthen this a little bit. It's a very neutral tone, and blend it in. And I think you can see that it's brought the bridge forward a little bit. I think I like that. Maybe his hoodie here could be a little bit darkened. his legs here. And connecting some of these green shapes with a little bit of white and yellow. Just makes them look not so separated. I have a watercolor pencil here, which is like a very mild brown, like a grey brown, and I'm just going to enhance a little bit of the railing. I'm going to dip the brush into some water and dip it some more. I want it to flow a bit. Wet the paper a bit. This is the beauty of testing whatever you're going to do first, because then you don't have to muck around. So I am going to just wet the railing a little bit. And I think I like that now. So that was a watercolor pencil. All right, one last thing, because it's a real place and I want it to, look something like it. So I'm going to put in a little bit of dark in there. I love the way Aquapasto keeps reactivating. So if you need to go on top of something, fix it up, do something, it still makes it easy to scrape into. So lo and behold, a bit of this and a bit of that. The purpose of sharing all this with you is to show you that even if you make a mistake, let it dry and there's always a way to bring it back. Sometimes the paint just needs to be a bit thinner, and when that's dry, a few tiny darks and lights can really lift it. Let me know if you're interested in seeing more fixes, because I've changed paintings from sitting in the drawer to selling the next day, and it all just comes from a little bit of learning and a bit of inspiration.